forget all you know about podcasts. We welcome you to an experience uniquely different. Please join us for our coverage of all entertainment on the fringe of society. The candles are lit, the lights are down low. It is now time to welcome our host as he steps up to the pulpit. The sacrifice has been prepared for the midnight black mass.
Ghastly greetings, groovy ghoulies, and welcome to another Midnight Black Mass podcast. Rev Dan Wilson here again, solo, starting the show. Not Han Solo, Rev Solo. Andrew Alexander still on the mend, had to have his jaw wired shut, lost a few teeth as a result of an attack from the White Rose faction at Empire Wrestling. Of course, we saw the fallout of that. He named me the interim commissioner in his absence, and so now I've got my hands full. But hey, earn a little extra payday on the side, so no complaints. But also now having to be the authority and wrangle the zoo that any professional wrestling promotion can be, as the commissioner and matchmaker of Empire Wrestling, at least until Andrew is back in the saddle. So obviously you can't talk. You can write, you can text, as I had mentioned to the fans there in the ring a few weeks ago, which is how he signed over the affidavit to, as a sort of a security contingency. If something ever happened to him, that I would be the guy to act in his stead. And so that's exactly what happened, but, still can't talk. So he's not very useful on a podcast right now. So, as we move forward without him, he is healing. He's doing a little bit better. Looks like no set timetable yet, or at least if he's been given one, he doesn't want me to reveal it. And that's probably smart, because you never want to give your enemies too much information. And I know the White Rose is listening. Also talked all of this smack about going to Cornelia, Georgia for Why We Wrestle, the former Anarchy and Wildside Wrestling Arena. The new promotion now taken over, and great event, year zero. The Soul Assassin Corey Chavis returned to the building. Tank and myself were also scheduled to return, but we did not, due to circumstances entirely beyond our control. I don't want to say much more than that right now, because I don't want to mess anything up or divulge information I'm not supposed to. But all I will say at the moment, and when the truth is able to be told, which it will be pretty soon, then I will certainly give you all the details. It's not nearly as exciting as you can imagine, but again, I don't like to speak for any wrestling office unless I've been given clearance to do so. So let's just say we didn't make it, and my sincere apologies to the staff. Obviously, they were going to honor me that night as one of the four pillars of Anarchy Wrestling and unveiled a big picture on the wall, or one of the four pillars of wrestling in the arena in the Church of Southern Wrestling, with Bill Barron, Jeff G. Bailey, and Slim J. And unfortunately, I did not make that. So you got to be a real asshole to miss your own Hall of Fame induction, so to speak. But that would be me. And, again, we greatly apologize to all of the fans in particular who paid their money to see us. It was a very last minute, as in getting ready and on the way to the arena incident. So, it really fucking sucks that we didn't make it down there, but hopefully we'll be back in February. Tank did get a bye in the first round of the tournament because of Masada's prior cancellation. So we're mainly going to visit and cause a little carnage, but I know people were looking forward to seeing us. So, again, please accept my apologies. That is home and always will be. Getting honored there is the closest to a WrestleMania moment I'll probably ever have. So to have missed it, it really is a kick in the balls, and we will make it up to you. I promise you that. So moving along, a little bit of wrestle news this week. It involves a former guest that we've had here on the show. And as a Throwback Thursday, we posted it over on the Facebook page at facebook.com/pottyhumor. Want to go check that out. It's an interview with the phenomenal AJ Styles, who now the hottest free agent in all of wrestling. It said Gunner was that prospect and certainly is still ranked high up there, but AJ no longer under contract to New Japan Pro Wrestling. And by all intents and purposes, looked like he finished up there along with his other Bullet Club compatriots, Luke Gallows, who I know okay. He's been a pretty cool guy the few times I've gotten to hang out with him. And I know he's really tight with one of my brothers in the No Pain Train, Iceberg. And Carl Anderson, who I'm not very familiar with personally, but, seen a bit of his work, and he's very good, old school type of grinder, which I like. Certainly is different than the large crop of modern independent wrestlers, and I think that's probably what helped him get noticed. And so good for him, and good for the Bullet Club members. So it looks like those two, AJ and Shinsuke Nakamura, who, if you've not seen him, definitely take a look at him. There's a super entertaining Japanese wrestler. He's been a top draw over there for many years. He's total, he brought sports entertainment to that style of wrestling, I'd say. Probably wasn't the first to do it, but certainly one of the most recent people to do it with great box office success and to great effect. And looks like all those guys potentially, the big rumor is they're all signing with WWE. And WWE has even played into this with their social media. They've had a lot of fun with it. A lot of the different wrestlers and roster members have had some fun with it. And, and as far as social media posts. So they definitely know the internet's excited and they're playing it up. Will the Bullet Club join en masse to the, to WWE? I don't know. Maybe. But they've also, it's a lot of great individual stars there, or a great tag team in Gallows and Anderson. So you could damn sure split those off and get a lot of mileage out of all of them, or you could put them all together, do something exciting. WWE's looking to do that. So exciting time to be in a wrestling business. Anytime you have that many very popular free agents, and the rumors are they're moving over, could mark a great shift in the business, and it could not. You never know, but it's one of those things that certainly has the potential to. So keep your eyes peeled on it. I have not talked to AJ or to Bill Behrens specifically about it. I know they're busy. I figured just let them do their thing, and I'll get up with them once everything's done and said, and offer any congratulations that might be necessary at that time. But very cool time again to be in the business. So we'll keep our eyes peeled on what's going on there. Of course, we lost the great frontman of Motorhead last week, Lemmy, one of my all-time musical heroes. I had quite a diatribe about that on last week's episode of the program. But another icon passes this week. And again, I'm not so sad on this one because, he was up there, but he was such a kind guy. I got to meet him, got to spend some time with him at a con here in Chattanooga. If the thing that sucks about Chattanooga is we don't hardly ever get anything cool like that, and that's why there was nobody there when we went. But the bonus for us is me and my wife and the great Muji and Tank. We all got to spend a lot of time with the guests that were there, and so we spent probably an hour, 2 hours talking to PJ Souls from the Halloween franchise, Devil's Rejects, and more. And the tall man, Angus Scrimm, who just recently passed away. As I woke up this morning and was checking my messages, saw that he had passed away. So very sad to hear that. Very glad I got to meet him and talk to him and spend a little bit of time with him. I sat there at his table for probably 20, 30 minutes, just shooting the breeze with him. And he looked like he was in pretty rough shape then. Very jovial and happy, but he didn't look like he felt great. And, I didn't catch hhis age, but he had to be in his 80s. So it's not a great surprise that anyone of that age passes, but damn it, just let's celebrate the contributions of what Don Cosarelli, the director of Phantasm, called one of, if not the last classic movie monster to pass away. And he certainly was that. The tall man terrified me as a child and continued into my adulthood as a giant horror movie fan. I love the entire Phantasm franchise. I thought it was just so unique and so different in a world where horror, in particular, very bad about copycatting what works. And so when something's successful in the horror field, you will see one thing that is awesome and original and fresh. And then for 5, 10 years after that, it seems like everybody copies what was successful. So the Phantasm franchise was just something unique and on its own island, and a really brilliant visionary stuff from director Don Coscarelli and all the actors, and the man who embodied the villain and the horrifying aspect of the film, the Tall Man. So check out Phantasm if you haven't. If you're a horror fan, you're looking for some good classic stuff you might have overlooked that. In honor of the Tall Man, why don't you check out that franchise? You won't be disappointed, boy. So, feature segment tonight on the program. Like I said last week, we probably and hopefully, fingers crossed, have enough material in the can to pass the time during Andrew's absence. If we do not, I have some interviews and some other special edition type things lined up that we will use to fill the time. So don't fear, the Midnight Black Mass not going anywhere. We took a small break on the holidays, but certainly back in action again. So this week goes back to a pre-recorded segment we did a couple months ago, just to have extra content in the event that something like this happened. So, hey, we're adults. We prepared. Give us a high five. So what we did is another edition of Playing Favorites. That's our segment where we spend at length talking about a particular subject and sort of doing a ranking, listing a top 5, top 10, what have you. So this week, we looked at our top 5 favorite wrestling feuds or angles. So it's a very lively discussion, includes a lot of great wrestling history, a lot of just cool stuff about our fandom growing up and our childhoods and the relationship to wrestling and some of these angles and the impacts and that they had on us. So without further ado, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with Playing Favorites, Feuds and Angles. Don't go anywhere.
And we're back on the Midnight Black Mass, and Playing Favorites has returned. One of my favorite times on the show when we really break down a list of our favorite things. And it could be many things, like Julie Andrews once sang in The Sound of Music. But in this case, it's wrestling. And 9 times out of 10, that is what we focus on the Playing Favorites segment of the program. But, you know, we've deviated. We did some Thanksgiving dishes and some fucking, like, music. And, like, there's been some deviations. But tonight, we're back on track, folks. We're back on track, Playing Favorites, the top 5 angles of all time in professional wrestling. What do you say, angles? Hypotenuse? Fucking right angle? Obtuse? No, a wrestling angle. What does an angle mean to you, Andrew?
Man, it has a wide variety of definitions. I think it just means anything that sets up a match. There can be angles that are really, really short, quick little storylines to set up a match, and then there can be angles that are drawn out for literally years. It really depends on how you look at it, but I just think that anything that gets you to, and nowadays they're kind of less and less, or they're quicker angles, and sometimes it's just maybe something that happens that night and it leads to a match. I mean, I think that falls under the umbrella of angles, but I think we'll probably focus on things that took a little more time, and you have to plant the seed and then build it and wait for something big to happen, and then it happens, and you want to see somebody get their ass kicked and somebody ride off into the sunset to victor and things such as that. I'm sure that's probably what we'll tackle a little bit more of.
A little bit of both, I think. A little bit of both. And I think, you know, by textbook definition, like an angle, in my opinion, would be anything that's done exterior of the ring to generate interest in what happens in the ring. And then, you know, which can lead to a feud, and angles are in the integral parts of feuds, and so, you know, it's part of the whole story. So, yeah, absolutely. I think it would apply in both types of scenarios that you've mentioned there. So we're going to rank our top 5. Tough one. Man, this was the toughest one I've had yet. I'm looking here at my list, and I have no less than 11. So I hope that I can get some honorable mention ones in when we're done here. But so many great ones that did not make my list. And I won't go through any of those right now because I don't want to spoil what you've got. But why don't you set the table for us, lay the plate out there, and let us know what you picked for your number 5 angle.
It was tough, but I didn't. I kind of went with stuff that I remember as a kid. Remember before I was in the wrestling business, things that just stuck with me, and then you can see them as they unfolded in their entirety and see how awesome it was and how it played into stuff. I didn't really go with a lot of blood feud stuff. Plus, I kind of had senses of some things that you would pick, and I wanted to pick different stuff that. So we'd have a wide variety of stuff to talk about. So I went with some, there may be better angles than these, but these are just ones that I remember vividly and remember watching and being just enthralled with and couldn't wait to see what happened. And then when you look back at it, you think, man, that really was well done from start to finish. Some of them, I think all on my list were pretty much perfect, kind of when you think about it. There's a couple that left some things out, but my number 5, just real quick, the bullet points. Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan are supposed to face at WrestleMania 8. For whatever reasons, to be discussed at another time, they decided not to go with that match. They wanted to get to Ric Flair and Randy Savage, and instead of just focusing on the world title, they added Ric Flair had an affair with Elizabeth years before, and they even did this fake photo spread in the WWF magazine with Ric Flair and Elizabeth poolside and all this stuff. Well, then it turns out that the photos were fake and that Ric Flair superimposed himself over Randy Savage, and they even had beach towels that said R&E, which stood for Rick and Liz or Rick and Elizabeth, but it really was Randy and Elizabeth, and just all this shit. And it was Ric Flair had her first and all that shit, which kind of, when you look back at that time in the WWF, was kind of racy stuff. And the match happens, Randy Savage wins, and Flair grabs Elizabeth. He's like, what about me? And he kisses her and she slaps him, and it's just all good stuff. And it went on a little past that into where Savage ended up taking Mr. Perfect away from the corner of Ric Flair as he replaced the Ultimate Warrior in a big tag match. It was a little small thing. It wasn't this multiple year drawn out thing with huge twists and surprises. But I just remember that as being a kid and totally buying into it and just freaking loving it.
That was a tremendous angle. That was one of the early pay-per-views I was allowed to buy. I got straight A's or something, and my mom rewarded me by letting me get the pay-per-view at the house, and I'd watch all of that TV, building it up. You talk about two masters of the craft, Flair and Savage, in their prime, and they both came out of it looking like superstars. There was such emotion attached to that feud, and like I said, the angle that kicked it all off was, of course, the photo spread, and it was absolutely very racy for the time, the very family-friendly product that the WWF was presenting then. It was a little adult-oriented, but it added to that emotional attachment. And everybody, not just me, not just you, but everybody watching that wanted to see Randy Savage kick Ric Flair's ass, and Flair was the epitome of a great heel. That's some masterpiece-level shit there, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. So what was your number 5?
Man, deliberation. The number 5 was a tough fucking pick. And there were 2 angles that kind of tied in that spot. But one of them was just so outlandish, I think it's worth talking about more. So I'll say what didn't make the cut, because I know it's not something that you're going to have picked. What did make the cut would have been just barely from Georgia Championship Wrestling, the 4 flat tires angle between the Fabulous Freebirds and Kevin Sullivan, and you know, Michael Hayes coming out there, fucking, you know, just doing the Michael Hayes thing, and with Kevin Sullivan not making it to the building and saying, of course, you know, I didn't make it. I had a flat, and he's like, hey, it's not my fault you had 4 flat tires, brother. He goes, wait a minute. I didn't say I had 4 flat tires. And it was fucking great. I don't remember a lot of it, but it's one that I watched just, you know, in my immersion of the various territories, and it always stuck with me. But number 5 is an angle shot in Memphis around like 84, I think, 85 maybe. It was done with Wildfire Tommy Rich. Tommy Rich had teamed up with Eddie Gilbert as the New Fabulous Ones, and it pretty much was a fairly disastrous run. You know, the Fabulous Ones were one of the huge attractions in Memphis. Stan Lane and Steve Kern, endorsed by Jackie Fargo, who was the legend of all legends in the area at the time, the only team that he'd ever come out and endorsed, and said, you know, they were the New Fabulous Ones, and not what the New Fabulous Ones is in the replacement, but they were like the New Fabulous Fargos. They were the Fabulous Ones. And they wore the suits and the high hats, Pally, as Jackie Fargo would say. So they were a huge attraction. Everybody loved them. Drew huge money in Memphis. They tried to replicate it with Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert and Wildfire Tommy Rich. And Tommy was a beloved babyface in Memphis for many years, and he turned. And the angle just, it kind of fell on its ass. Like nobody really bought into the new Fabs. So Tommy, and they were heels to boot, so they turned them heel because they weren't working, and then they've had to figure out a way to split them up and turn them back babyface. So they bring in fucking Tommy Rich's mom, Peggy, and she comes on the Memphis television, and she's like, you know, people, I seen the way he's been acting, what he's been doing out here. He's been out here cheating and breaking rules and running with this bad crowd. And I tell you what, that ain't my Tommy. And like she works up some fucking tears and is fucking talking about, you know, I just want my baby boy to come home, call his mama. And I mean, these people fucking believe that shit, you know. And so it leads to the split of the new Fabs, which did huge business for Memphis because it was a fucking amazing angle. Like, it was Eddie Gilbert at work, was a master booker. And you know, he was like this bipolar personality with Tommy, like they would get in a fucking fight and like bloody each other up on the set and then be like hugging and crying like 5 minutes later. Like, it was just fucking amazing shit. And that ranks it at number 5.
Yeah, anytime you involve the old mom, that's probably good stuff. Yeah, that Freebirds, that little spiel, that's awesome shit, of course. I love it. Number 4, I struggled with this, but I wanted to get something that was non-WWF at the time. And there was a lot of honorable mentions I had, especially just quickly throwing together, you know, some different angles. I went with the first six months of the NWO. That was like, when you look, when I remember being 12 years old and watching every Monday, that shit was fucking huge. We all know that the NWO, the angle went to shit over time, and it just became so whored out, it wasn't anything like it was. But if you think back to that first initial 5 to 6 months, that shit was just incredible. Every Monday there was just like surprises and who was going to join, and as Scott Hall shows up, Nash shows up, Hogan turns heel. I actually ordered that pay-per-view. That was the only WCW pay-per-view I ever ordered and paid for, Bash at the Beach 96. And they keep building it up. And then kind of the top, the peak of the angle as far as it being hot was when Sting gets out of the limousine and attacks his best friend Lex Luger, and there's just pandemonium, people freaking the fuck out. And then you go to the Fall Brawl War Games, and Sting's like, it wasn't me, I didn't do it. And Luger's like, I looked right into your eyes, I know it was you. And then Sting comes out to join the NWO in War Games, but then the last member of Team WCW is the real Sting, and everyone's shocked. Just being a kid, man, I ate that shit up. I was like, holy shit, Sting joined the NWO. I mean, I ran out of my house screaming, like kids in the neighborhood and stuff. But then it went to shit and was like pretty much horrible after that, with the exception of the Hogan-Sting build, which in turn also ended up horrible.
Yeah, that match laid the biggest egg for the biggest build of all time, I think.
Yeah, it did. And then, of course, whomever in charge fucked that up. But that's for another podcast. That could be a picking favorites, biggest ball drops in wrestling. That might be number one. But that's my number 4 there. I figure that'd be a good one on the list.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Like that was such an exciting time in the business. When you're a fan, like especially everyone you knew was tuning in. I was like 16, 17 years old when all that was going down. So, prime demographic for what they were selling. And I was buying.
Yeah.
I was buying in spades, and the NWO was a pop culture phenomenon, and we haven't seen one like that in quite a while since Stone Cold and some of the other things that came just right around the same time. So yeah, they definitely get a place in the top 5. My number 4 would be another Memphis angle, actually, and an angle that did not result in great business. They thought the idea was if you have the hottest feud going and you have the heel come out and say that everybody's biased against him here in Memphis because Jerry the King Lawler is like royalty here. He is tied in politically with everyone in the town. So he's got the referees in his pocket. He's got the promoter in his pocket. He's got the fan support, which is unfair, as Terry Funk, who is the opposing opponent here, is what he has to say. And so they decide they're going to have it out once and for all with no bias, no referee. It's going to be an empty arena match. And they're going to meet in the Mid-South Coliseum in the middle of the day when nobody's there. They're going to fight one-on-one to settle the score. And it's just, to me, one of the greatest pieces of business as far as, like, entertaining. It transcends wrestling into something that is far more entertaining than, like, just wrestling should be. Like, it really shows how talented Lawler and Terry Funk are and how, in another lifetime they probably could have been big Hollywood movie stars, because this shit is just so great. Like, Funk comes in, and he's just raising hell. Lance Russell's there narrating, and they get this great, like, off-the-cuff shot of Lance Russell smoking a cigarette before they go to recording. And then Terry Funk comes in, and he's just screaming and cussing at Lance Russell. Where's Lawler? Where is he? Where is that son of a bitch? And Lance even gets a little fired up and cusses back at him. He's like, hell, Terry, I don't know. And
he was probably Lance had probably had a couple of beers.
Yeah, he might have. He was ready and Johnny on the spot, boy. But so Funk gets in the ring. He says, he's yellow. He's not going to show up. He's yellow. He's a coward. He's a coward. And then, of course, Lawler shows up in his gear. Like, Terry Funk just showed up in fucking, like, street clothes, I guess. Or just maybe his basic trunks. I can't remember. I think he was in his trunks. But Lawler, like, comes out with his full regalia, like his crown and his scepter and his fucking, his robe and shit. And Funk says, look at you. Look at him, Lance. You look like an asshole.
Very racy for the time. Very, very salty language.
Very much. They bleeped it all out on TV, but now, the raw footage has made its way around so you can actually see it unedited. But so Funk is just the epitome of an all-time great heel in this spot. He's antagonizing Lawler. He's cussing him, calling every name in the book. They get in the ring, they fight. They have a very realistic-looking skirmish, because it's not like they're not working a crowd. They're just fighting, and so they really get in there and mix it up. And fucking the fight spills out to the arena, and Lawler gets the upper hand, starts whipping Terry Funk's ass, makes a big comeback. Funk cuts him off. Fucking Funk gets a fucking chair and breaks it, and is gonna try to fucking stab Lawler in the face with it, and Lawler fucking, kicks him at the last second. It fucking goes up and stabs Funk in the eye, and Funk fucking starts bleeding from the eye, and he just then turns into the ultimate, he's all in once a chicken shit, a coward, a sympathetic character at times, and a fucking giant raving asshole. It's this fucking masterpiece. He's like, oh God, oh I can't see, why, and he's fucking crying and sobbing. He's like, oh my eye, Lawler. He's yellow. He's fucking amazing, and it will always rank in my favorite wrestling things ever.
Yeah, I had a strong feeling that would be on your list, but it's as good as you say. It's just so, if anything, it's just so entertaining because Terry Funk is so awesome, and just, even if you don't like it, you can get a laugh out of it just because of the shit he's saying and yelling and, some of the stuff that you've said. But, and that's something that, man, I just don't think that's one of those things that could just never be duplicated. I don't think they could do something like that now and it have that same feel, just stuff has changed too much.
Yeah, it was, and like I said, it wasn't a great piece of business as far as, the box office. They said the house actually went down as a result. They're like, well, hell, you give us the match for free on TV.
Yeah.
But very innovative concept nonetheless.
Yeah, my number 3, I told you right before we went on air, literally just minutes as I'm calling in, I switched my number 3 and my number 1 because I was thinking of okay, what will I say about number 3? I'll just jump to just bullet points. And as I do it, I'm like, God, that was so fucking good. I'm putting it number 1. Fuck it. Because my now number 3, that was actually number 1 on my list, it didn't have big payoff. It didn't have it didn't go as planned because they changed a lot of stuff up, which we've already talked about with WrestleMania 8. But just remembering as a kid that fucking snake biting the Macho Man on the arm is just the clearest memory I'll ever have of professional wrestling. I know Mankind.
Hey, wait, that's my number 3 too. So we're right thinking on the same level.
Wow, that's crazy. You have the wedding. The wedding's awesome. After the wedding, the snake pops up out of the present, which is already that is gold. Elizabeth screaming, the Undertaker and Jake Roberts fuck up the Macho Man, and then they got to fight. Macho Man's got to be reinstated. He's got to get his hands on Jake the Snake Roberts. He's got to get his hands on Snake Man. And they finally reinstate him. He can't get his hands on Jake Roberts. And in the Royal Rumble, he comes out the ring. Jake Roberts scurries away. The greatest Royal Rumble of all time, 1992. Jake Roberts is nowhere to be found. Randy Savage is looking for him. He's looking for him. He's obsessed. Barely gets his hands on him in the Rumble, and it still has to wait. And surely it was going to lead to a WrestleMania 8 match, and just they changed some things, and I think it had to do with Hogan leaving, and you couldn't put the belt on Hogan as he was leaving, but you didn't want to put him under because you protected him. So they changed some shit up, and they blew it off a little early, but it led to the babyface turn of The Undertaker, which was fucking huge. And Jake Roberts ended up leaving right after that, which was unfortunate. So it didn't have the ending that it should have, but it was still great business. And that damn snake biting the Macho Man, that shit is insane.
That fucking cobra gnawing on his fucking arm on national television is one of the damnedest things I have ever and will ever see. That
fucking
captured
crying
me.
in the crowd.
Yeah, and I mean, what was it, 92, right? 92?
Early 92.
So I would have been 11. That captured me like few things had ever captured me in professional wrestling. And, I was always more of an NWA fan, but that, Randy Savage and Jake Roberts were two of the top guys ever in the WWF. And
I guess the actual bite would have been in the fall of 91.
Okay. I would have just turned 11 around that time.
Yeah.
That was like right after Survivor Series or?
Right before. Yeah.
Right before. Okay. That's right, because they did the Tuesday in Texas, and they had their first match there. Actually, and you probably did too, because it was in Dalton. I got to see them on the house show loop after that angle, where it was Jake and Savage in a cage on top, and that was pretty awesome to see live.
Were you at that show in Dalton?
I was, yes.
Yeah, that was my first ever wrestling show, live event.
Well, there you go. So, angle was strong enough to get you into the building, brother.
Absolutely. But yeah, that shit was just all. And like I said, it was my number one. I just had to, with it not being panned out, and when I was just thinking of what I originally had at number 3, I was like, I'm flipping flopping them because it's just so good. But all the things we've talked about so far are just fucking genius.
Flipping and flopping and flying, baby.
So I guess our number 3, we were right there in sync, and my number 2, don't remember vividly as a child, just a little younger, but when I look back at it and I just see how, and the business had to be done a certain way because Hogan was Hogan, but he couldn't make the obligations as a champion needed to make, so they put the belt on Savage. But looking back at just all the little ways they planted those seeds of jealousy, and the Royal Rumble and the Survivor Series and the Saturday Night's main events, and then when fucking Savage got shit canned from the ring and just demolished Miss Elizabeth, and Hogan takes her to the back, leaving him high and dry, and then they're in the back, and Savage is talking about, I see that lust in your eyes for Elizabeth and all this shit, and then he hits him in the head and whoops his ass backstage on the Saturday Night's main event, and they lead to the Mega Powers exploding. That shit was done just so fucking well. And, those guys just pulled that off so great. Elizabeth was perfect in that role. And just looking back, it's the type of thing that has been tried to be duplicated just 100 times in similar ways, but it'll never be that good and that fresh is when it happened in 88, 89.
You had all the components working together. You had Hogan, who was in the role of unwitting accomplice, but you had Jesse Ventura and the various heels stirring the pot, saying shit like, look at him, he's looking at her. He, basically implying he wants to fuck her. And, that he's basically just trying to leech on to Savage because he's got the belt of the girl, and, that Hogan wants to be. But, of course, everybody loved Hogan at the time, believed in Hogan. And so, it was more played off the fact that he was the unwitting accomplice. He was just trying to do the right thing and ended up the wrong place at the wrong time. And the emotion behind it, like when Savage finally attacks him, he's got tears welling up in his eyes, and fucking Elizabeth screaming in the background, and fucking this shit Hogan saying just beforehand is it's masterpiece level shit again.
Yeah, if Hogan could have acted that well in some of his movies, he may have had a hit.
Well, don't discount Santa with muscles.
But, Christmas right around the corner, so I guess we can't discount that. But, and it was just, and it's definitely, it had that soap opera element that a lot of people and a lot of diehard wrestling fans hate. But I just don't know how you can hate on that. Like, it was just so well done. It was just so perfect. And it just worked so well. And you know, they really, that was kind of the Mega Power started it, but they got years and years and years of business off that, 10, 11, 12 years, all going back to being the Mega Powers, basically coming back together, breaking up, back together, breaking up. So it definitely planted the seeds for a lot of money in those guys' pockets.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very, very good shit. So, my number two and number one angles both coming from Mid-South Wrestling. In my opinion, just personally, the most well-booked professional wrestling show in wrestling history. And just as we record this, and hopefully they're still up, hopefully they maybe added more by the time this makes the air, Mid-South Wrestling on the WWE Network, they put a lot of the old stuff up. It's got a lot of this shit that I'm talking about. So go look it up and check it out if you haven't. It is it's some of the most detail-oriented shit ever done in wrestling, and they did enormous business, some of the biggest box offices at the time, breaking records for the arena. As a matter of fact, this one I'm talking about here that ranks at number 2 broke the record at the time for the Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, I'm sure that record has since been passed, but at the time, in 1985, that would have been the all-time box office record there, and it was the Last Stampede. And the angle that started it all, it's the Midnight Express with Jim Cornette against Cowboy Bill Watts and the tag team partner. But how did it start when Cowboy Bill Watts wasn't an active wrestler when the whole thing got going? Well, Bill Watts was the authority figure. You know, he's retired from the ring, and he laid back and become more of a matchmaker and an announcer on the program and things. You know, he'd been around. They'd sold this for a while. And so he's interviewing Jim Cornette on the program. And they just done an angle not too long before that where Cornette got humiliated on his birthday and got his face put in the birthday cake. You know, a traditional wrestling trope that certainly wasn't the first time it was ever done there and had been done many times previously. But so Cornette was fired up and pissed off in the interview. And he keeps putting his hands on Bill Watts, demanding, you know, what's going to happen. Like, you know, you're not going to insult me like that. Do you know who my mother is? You know, it just, you know, keeps like you giving the nudge, and Bill Watts tells him the first time, he's like, look, I told you, don't put your hands on me ever again. And he keeps on, and Bill, you can see Bill Watts get it. He's like, I'm going to tell you one more time, don't you ever put your hands on me. And Cornette just keeps rattling off at him. Look, I'm getting my attorneys, and I'm going to sue Mid-South Wrestling. I'm going to take everything you got. And what are you big fathead? You're a mouthful of memories that you can't back up no more. Fucking just keeps on, and finally he touches him at one last time, and fucking Bill Watts slaps the fucking shit out of him. And I mean, slaps the guy like ain't no fucking work. It wasn't no fucking. He pulled it back. He slapped the goddamn taste out of this motherfucker's mouth, and he fucking goddamn cuts a flip, like, legit, on the fucking floor, because, you know, Bill Watts is a giant fucking hulk of a man, and Cornette was a little measly manager. And so he does that. What happens? The Midnight Express hits, and they beat the fucking dog shit out of Bill Watts and fucking color him up and rip his suit and shit. And so he's got to go get some help from the biggest baby face that Mid-South ever had, the Junkyard Dog. He goes out to the Junkyard Dog's fucking property, and he's like down by the lake, like fucking with a boombox, like playing some fucking Grandmaster Flash or some shit, and he's like fucking pumping iron down on his fucking property. And but see, the Junkyard Dog unfortunately had lost the lose release town stipulation for 90 days, so he had to wait it out. He's like, I'm a man of my word, Cowboy Bill Watts, I can't do this. I can't come out here and bring my word to these people and mean something. My word is my bond. And so Bill Watts like, hey, I can't ask a man to go back on his word. So again, he says, but I know a guy now. I know a guy named this man named Stagger Lee. He lived down on the wrong side of the tracks. He's a rough tumble, but you know, you tell him dog sent you, he might help you out. So he fucking sends Jim Ross to go find Stagger Lee, and Stagger Lee makes him blindfold himself into the entrance to his property so he can't see what it looks like. So you get the visual of like a 20-something-year-old Jim Ross fucking blindfolded walking through the woods of Louisiana looking for Stagger Lee, and he finds a man who looks suspiciously like the Junkyard Dog but is wearing a mask. And, you know, he's like, "What sent you?" Oh, yeah, you know, I tell him he still owe me for that last time I come out there and helped him. Yeah, sure, I'll help you out. So Stagger Lee agrees that they do the big fucking tag match in the Superdome. Cowboy Bill Watts comes out of retirement, the last Stampede, teaming with Stagger Lee, who everyone fucking knows is the goddamn Junkyard Dog, and against the Midnight Express. It's fucking like, that's fucking magic right there.
Oh yeah, I've seen very little of that. I've seen the slap. I've seen the Stagger Lee vignette, but it's been so long. But I know I've seen it. That's something I should definitely go back and check out. But yeah, that's just badass shit. That's good wrestling stuff, and stuff like that has been done since. But that particular type of thing with the mask and everything, that shit always works. It's always fun, and it's tongue in cheek, and the heel gets theirs in the end, and everybody's happy. You don't see a lot of stuff like that anymore. It's simple, but nowadays people would probably snub their nose and think it was silly, you know.
Yeah, I think it's the right circumstances, the right people involved. It'd still work. You just have to play it carefully.
Yeah. So my number one is I was trying not to lean towards the direction everybody knew I would go, but when I just thought about it, the angle was so good. And there's better angles, there's better blood feuds, and there's better heat. But this shit was done so perfectly to where it was so realistic, and that's something that is always great when you have in wrestling, and it can still be done, is when it's realistic and people believe it and people can get behind it and be like, that's so true and that feels real. But you have the Hart family brothers going into a match against the King and his Knights. Of course, Jerry Lawler gets in a bit of trouble and Shawn Michaels takes his place. The only Hart brother eliminated is the baby Hart, Owen. After Bret Hart, he collides with Bret Hart and gets rolled up. So the whole family wins except him. So he's jealous. He comes back. He's mad. He's blew his top. He's pissed off. And then over the Christmas break and the New Year's, they piece it back together and they decide they're going to team up at the Rumble for the tag team titles. Bret Hart hurts his knee in that match and he can't make the tag to Owen. He goes for the sharpshooter and he can't do it. The ref stops the match, so Owen Hart loses his chance to become a champion like his brother once was. So he takes out the knee, and then Bret comes back, hobbles into the Royal Rumble and wins it, or co-wins it. Then they go to WrestleMania, and Bret Hart refuses to fight his brother. He refuses, but then he has to get his title match against Yokozuna. So he wrestles Owen Hart, and Owen Hart actually wins. It's the biggest upset of all time at WrestleMania, Madison Square Garden. But then at the end of the night, Bret Hart wins the world title, so he's still jealous. And then Owen Hart wins the King of the Ring, just like his brother did a year before. And they build it up to the big cage match at SummerSlam, which was one of the best cage matches of all time. It's got to be the best cage match of all time that didn't have a drop of blood.
Yeah, definitely.
And they get the family involved, and they, the bulldog comes back, the anvil comes back, the brother-in-laws, and they just got a lot out of that shit, and they didn't, not just that time frame, it went on all the way till 97 when they all got back together and formed the heel Hart Foundation, which was huge business as well. But just the way they did it, the way they did all of that stuff with these two brothers, that you believe they hated each other, and then you look back and you know that they didn't hate each other. It was so well done. And in a time when a lot of the stuff in the WWF was not going very well, looking back, and there was a lot of trouble, and they lost Hogan, and They had Savage through most of that, I guess, but they lost a lot of big stars and they lost a lot of steam and money and things like that. It was just, when you look back at it, start to finish, it was damn near perfect. I don't know what you could change about it.
Yeah, that was some really good shit. Like, I wouldn't think of it on my top 5 list, but it's hard to argue. Goddamn, I really enjoyed all of that. A great period of technical wrestling for the top main event scene of the WWF, and also huge elevation of Owen. Now, a lot of people suppose his brother. I remember even from a fan's perspective, it's like, well, Owen may not be able to beat most of the main event guys, but he knows Bret better than anybody would know him because he's his brother, so he's got the edge. And it made total sense. And that was such a great feud. Like you said, probably the greatest cage match to never drop one droplet of blood.
And I mean, arguably, you're not going to name a ton of cage matches better than that, blood or no blood. I mean, it was awesome. And they did sell wrestling, and there was this, and Owen had this hatred, but Bret never had the hatred. He always hoped that his little brother would straighten up, and it was killing their mother and their father, and their mom was just so upset, and just all this shit. And then all the way to when Owen cost him the title against Bob Backlund when he was crying because Bret Hart was locked in the crossface chicken wing for well over 10 minutes, I believe, and he's crying, begging his mom to throw in the towel. Just such good shit. And I mean, there's bigger heat, and there's bigger money draws and all that stuff. But there's not a lot of angles that you can say kind of seem perfect, and I really think that one was pretty perfect.
Yeah, it was fantastic. So my number one, to round things out here and wrap it up, another Mid-South favorite. A lot more to this angle than I'm going to talk about. You can go look online. There's tremendous write-ups from a variety of different websites. There's one Mid-South Wrestling tribute site called, I believe, MidSouthWrestling.com that has a full write-up on the history of this angle. A little bit of background just is that Ted DiBiase was the top heel in Mid-South for many years, or many months at least, moving on to that. He had a shocking turn, and they did great business, and, he'd been a heel for a while. It was time that he'd go back. So they orchestrate just this brilliant piece of business where DiBiase is the North American champion and has been for a long time. It's the top champion in the area in Mid-South, their version of the heavyweight title. And the Ric Flair, the world champion's coming to town, and the North American champion's going to get the shot. So you have this rare heel versus heel dynamic, which they didn't do a lot in those days. So right off the bat, things are looking interesting for this matchup. As Flair comes in, they're going to have it on Mid-South television for the first time ever, and Mid-South was the thing. At the time, squash matches were the formula of the day for most territories wrestling shows. Mid-South, one of the first to make a fully competitive show on a weekly basis. You'd have some enhancement matches, but I mean, you got the stars every week, and you got good matches, and that was pretty much the formula that Monday Night Raw and Nitro and things later adopted. So they had this tremendous momentum. They had the world title match. Flair is not a regular competitor here. They treat him as a huge deal. He's the world champion coming in from the outside. And so what happens here? DiBiase gets lined up. They're getting ready to start the match. Dick Murdoch comes out of nowhere. And Dick Murdoch, who's been an associate of DiBiase's for many months, he comes in and he's like, "Now, Teddy, I trained you. I helped you out a lot when you was coming up to business, and I think, you just need to step aside and let me have this world title shot. I deserve this." And Ted's like, I'm the North American champion. I earned this by myself. You didn't help me win the North American title. You didn't help me do, blah, 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 blah. And Murdoch's like, well, I just think that ain't right, man, and he's just like playing it cool, and then just fucking jacks DiBiase up, fucking busts him upside the head, throws him outside the fucking ring, posts him. DiBiase hits the fucking gusher of all gushers. I mean, the shit is just spraying fucking like everywhere. And of course, this is before the bell even rings. Like, they're in the ring doing ring introductions for the world title match. And before the fucking bell even rings, DiBiase gets jumped, left in a puddle of blood. They did make a big deal about it. They take him to the hospital. DiBiase suffered arterial damage. He may not be back, period. Much less for the world title match. We'll keep you posted. We apologize to Ric Flair. We'll get a standby opponent out here, but it won't be for the belt. And that was the deal. And so they're giving updates throughout the broadcast on his condition. And DiBiase fucking comes back from the hospital with his fucking head all bandaged up. He's covered in fucking dried blood. And he cuts this fucking amazing promo. And he's the top heel. The crowd is on their feet chanting, Teddy, Teddy. So one fucking thing turned the top heel to the top babyface and put him in the greatest position ever. And then he goes out there and, of course, goes toe-to-toe with Flair in a great match, but he loses so much blood he can't fucking continue. And he's made as the babyface from there forward until he leaves to go to WWF.
Yeah, that's badass, and I have seen that, and that's amazing, and it was just so well done, so perfect, and those guys you mentioned, they're all fucking amazing talents. I didn't think that'd be your number one. I thought you were going to go with Little Freebirds JYD, but that's a pleasant surprise for sure. I agree. That's a badass angle, and that's kind of like we talked about, kind of a short thing. Like, it wasn't, it had history behind it, which helped, but it was kind of a boom, a one-shot thing to turn him babyface, but it worked like gangbusters, and I mean, it was a badass piece of business for sure.
Absolutely. Folks, we're out of time. Thanks for joining us. Playing favorites, keep one foot in the gutter and one fist in the gold. We're out.
This has been a production of the Potty Humor Network. Find us online at youtube.com/pottyhumor or subscribe to us weekly and never miss an episode by searching Potty Humor on iTunes or Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and good night.